Are we ready, everybody? Television, yeah, it's recording. I'm going to assume that we're good to go. So, I have the script and now it's gone. One moment. Welcome to today's Redevelopment Agency Board meeting. To help reduce the transmission of COVID-19, we have returned to holding our meetings virtually. This return to online meetings follows an increase in COVID-19 cases and updated mask requirements. We're closely monitoring the situation, and the RDA board will return with hybrid or in-person meetings when appropriate and safer for the public and city employees. We start our RDA meetings with comments to the board. Your feedback is always welcomed, and you can share that with the board anytime by mailing the council office at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. We are accepting your comments through WebEx. And for those whose only option is to call in, staff will be monitoring a separate telephone line. I want to mention our rules of the quorum. These are guidelines to help our meeting progress in an orderly, civil, efficient way. We will move through the agenda and want to give everyone the opportunity to voice their opinions without feeling intimidated. In order to achieve this, our rules of the quorum begin from the moment you arrive into our virtual meeting. The RDA board respects all points of view, and we welcome new insights. Please be respectful. Avoid yelling, profanity, or making racial slurs, obscene, or defamatory remarks. If you use profanity during your comment, your line will be muted. And any comments that reach a level of disrespect, I will ask that you be muted, and you will forfeit your opportunity to address the board today. If you're not able to complete your comments this afternoon, you're welcome to email the board or call our comment line. In addition, our staff will request for your name during the registration process. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of the quorum. If your registered name doesn't meet this requirement, then our staff will use the chat feature to gather that information from you. Taylor Hill from our staff is helping to moderate the meeting and will be messaging with the attendees to coordinate on any questions with your commenting registration. Staff is handling a number of tasks. Please limit messages to technical issues and minimal changes to your registration. Taylor Hill will be calling the names of those who wish to comment and unmuting lines. When Taylor unmutes your line and lets you know it's your turn, please state your first and last name, indicate the topic you're speaking on, and the 2-minute timer will begin. At the 2-minute remark, we will announce time and your microphone will be muted. We will now open our general comment period. Taylor, please start with our first comment.
Madam Chair, Taylor's audio is having some issues, so I'll just call names for right now. Just Isaac. Kevin Emerson is first, and I'll unmute him in a second.
Any comments, Taylor?
Oh, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I could hear you, Isaac.
Okay, sorry, I might have been muted. Taylor is having some issues with her audio, so I'll be calling names for now. I'll be Kevin Emerson is here for general comment.
Right, thank you.
And Kevin, you are unmuted.
Hello, hi everyone. This is Kevin Emerson, and I actually I just logged in in the way that I thought I needed to. I'm just here to listen in and answer possible questions about one of the agenda items coming up. So I don't have any comments at this time, except that I appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you. No problem.
We don't seem to have anybody else here for general comment. Then.
All right. Then we're moving on with our agenda. And we're now at the public hearing portion of our agenda. We only have one public hearing, item B1 resolution, the RDA budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2021-22. The same rules of the quorum that I earlier explained also applies to our public hearing portion of the board's agenda. Now, before we begin taking comments, I will first turn the time over to Ben Lutke, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give a short introduction. Thank you, Ben.
There are 3 items in the budget amendment. They total $221,000 of new expenditures. The items include relocation and rental assistance for current RDA commercial tenants on Main Street, funding a follow-up technical analysis study for daylighting of City Creek along the Folsom Trail, and several accounting adjustments for the North Temple Strategic Intervention Fund, which has a balance of just under $4 million. The administration's proposal and the prior presentation are available in today's meeting packet.
Right, thank you, Ben. Taylor or Isaac, please start with our first public comment.
Great. So we have 3 people here today. We'll begin with. I'm sorry, I'm pulling up the participants. Peter Nelson. Peter, you are now unmuted.
Okay, yeah, thanks everyone. This is Peter Nelson from Salt Lake City Sustainability. And similar to Kevin Emerson, I'm just here to answer any possible questions on an agenda item for later on in the meeting. So thank you for having me.
Okay, then we will move on to Lauren Racy. Lauren, you are now unmuted. 1 second. Okay, Lauren, you are now unmuted.
This is Lauren. I'm here with the RDA. I think we all must have gotten the incorrect link to participate in the meeting, but yeah, no comment. We'll be presenting later. Thanks.
Okay, in that case, we have no comments. My apologies for that.
Problem. Thank you, Isaac. So we're going to move on to item C, which is Redevelopment Agent's business, and a motion to meet remotely without an anchor location.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Does the board want to close or consider a vote on the public hearing for budget amendment number 1?
Board members, we didn't have anybody call in about this, so do we?
There is a motion sheet
Okay.
for your consideration.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
I move that the board close the public hearing and adopt the resolution amending the fiscal year 2021-22 final budget of the redevelopment agency as shown on the motion sheet.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Board Member Dugan and a second, and seconded by Board Member Perez. I'm going to roll call.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
can I ask a question before we vote? I see that this item's also number 5 on our agenda today. Are we discussing this again after we adopt it? Is that what I'm seeing?
So that's up to you. There were no further questions after the first briefing, but if there are new questions, we have it listed as tentative in case you would like a follow-up discussion. But
Okay,
it's
but if-
totally up to the board. If you are comfortable, you can vote and adopt, or you can just close the public hearing and talk about it at the briefing.
Understood. Thanks.
So the motion was to close the public hearing and adopt, or was it just to close the public hearing, Dan?
Close the public hearing and adopt.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion by Dan Dugan and seconded by Ferris. I'm going to roll call. Ferris,
Yes.
Wharton
Is not present.
is not present. Okay, Wharton is absent. Mano,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And so it passes. Thank you. We are moving on to, now we're moving on to item C1, motion meeting remotely without an anchor location. Do we have the motion sheet? Someone.
One second.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Second.
Right. So we have a motion by Fowler and seconded by Ferris. I'm going to roll call.
Sorry,
And,
RD Chair Member, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is Cindy Lou.
okay, hi Cindy.
I believe the motion is just to ratify the determination of the chair. There's no legislation associated, so no resolution.
Got it. Sorry about that. So, Madam Chair,
No
I
problem.
would amend my motion to ratify the decision of the RDA chair to meet remotely based on COVID-19.
I re-second that motion.
All right. Motion by Fowler, seconded by Ferris. I'm going to roll call this. Ferris,
Yes.
Wharton is absent. Mano,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That passes. Moving on to item number 2. It's the project area extensions follow-up. At the table, we have Ben Lutke, Council Office Policy Analyst, and Danny Walls, RDA, COO. So Ben, go ahead. Or Danny, whoever will present today on that.
This is the second briefing about extending the property tax increment collection period for project areas. You may remember at the last briefing that you took a straw poll and supported a 2-year extension for 4 of the project areas. That would include the Central Business District, North Temple, the Granary District, and the Depot District. The extension can be done unilaterally by the board without approval of other taxing entities. This is allowed by state law. The administration stated they will coordinate with the other taxing entities, like the school district and the county, about the extensions and discuss potential shared priorities for the use of that additional property tax increment funding. The extensions would impact 7 taxing entities, including the city. The attorney's office prepared a resolution. It's in your packet. The resolution would authorize those 4 project area extensions. It's a 2-year extension for each of the project areas. The pandemic-related negative impacts are listed in the resolution, and those are the basis for extension. They include delayed development of new projects and increased vacancy rates in existing projects, increased construction costs, which have caused financial gaps and project delays, and a greater need for business support resulting from their revenue losses. There is a motion sheet in your packet, and it's important to note that if the board wants to extend the Depot District, you would need to take that vote today because the depot district has an earlier deadline than the other project areas because of noticing requirements in state law. That's everything I have on this item. We can open it up for discussion or questions. Otherwise, the motion sheet is ready with options to vote.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
I move that the board adopt a resolution authorizing a 2-year property tax increment collection period extension for the Central Business District, North Temple, Depot District, and Granary District project areas.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Board Member Fowler and seconded by Board Member Dugan, correct? Okay, I'm going to roll call. Ferris,
Yes.
Wharton is absent. Mano,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes. That's awesome. We're moving on to item number 3, which is informational about potential revisions to the RDA guiding framework that was adopted in November 2019. At the table, we have Tammy Hansaker, RDA Deputy COO, Court Atley, RDA Senior Project Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, today is just we had hoped to have a briefing and a discussion with the board about some potential revisions to the guiding framework. Some of you may recall that that framework was adopted by the board in January of 2019. And it's really kind of a foundational strategic operational document that includes a mission statement for the RDA, as well as some values that articulate the intended economic, social, as well as physical outcomes of the projects in our work, and also a process that we use to evaluate requests for financial assistance from the agency. And a key part of that is identifying to what degree a project creates public benefit. And we call those public benefits livability benchmarks. And we can chat more about those today. The board has had a number of discussions lately that has made us feel like we should really return to the guiding framework and revise it a little bit. Those discussions have included the discussions about housing funding priorities, as well as conversations last month. Tammy gave a presentation about alignment and realignment of agency strategy and resources. And then Ashley presented on equity and inclusion. And those 3 topics in particular sort of had us want to reach back and make sure that the guiding framework was really up to date. And so we've discussed it at length as staff. We've had conversations with our advisory committee, and we have some potential revisions to that document that we'd like to share with you today. So with that, I'd like to share my screen, if that's okay, and kind of take a look at those, and we can kind of go through them at a high level and discuss any of them if you'd like to.
Absolutely. Thanks, Court.
Can you guys see my screen there?
Yes.
Great. So this is the guiding framework document, and what it's showing there is in red line form. The struck out in red would be sort of the items we would like to delete, and then underlined in red would be items that we're proposing to add. And you can see as you look at this that there are a couple of little changes to the mission statement, and really it's just these 2 words. We'd like to replace the word revitalize with the word strengthen, and that is because we felt like the word revitalize was a little bit of a value judgment that maybe a neighborhood wasn't vital to begin with. And really what we're doing is we're investing in and we're strengthening these areas of the city. So that's would be the reason for that. And then the other change would be to these conversations around equity and inclusion. We really wanted to get equity into the mission statement. And so you can see there, that we've added the word equitable in front of communities so that the mission statement now reads that the agency strengthens neighborhoods and business districts to improve livability, spark economic growth, and foster authentic, equitable communities. And then the rest of the mission statement would remain unchanged. So just a couple little tweaks to the mission statement there. One, I think, is just to make the language a little more clear, and then one clearly to incorporate equity. There's some changes to the values as well. As I mentioned earlier, the values really state the economic, the social, and the physical outcomes that we expect from agency projects and work. And with regard to economic growth, the value of economic growth, we would like to change that to economic opportunity to reflect the principles of equity and inclusion, and change the language there to be a little more broad. Whereas previously we had mentioned investment and property values, what we would like to do is sort of zoom out a little, if you will, and state that really the economic opportunity value is that we would invest in the long-term prosperity and growth of our local economy. So that would be new language on that value to replace the old language. Under community impact, we would like to totally rename this value to equity and inclusion. This value has always been the one that's specifically about people and quality of life. And so the new language here would be that we prioritize people-focused projects and programs that encourage everyone to participate in and benefit from development decisions that shape their communities. This is an acknowledgement that we're doing our best work when we are out in the community, when we are listening to them carefully, and we are doing projects that they want to see in their communities to make their lives better, and hence the sort of people-focused projects and programs element to the language there. And then over on neighborhood vibrancy, just a little tweak there we felt like the word built environment might be a little jargony for like real estate development work. So we changed that to places. And then the word resilient, we changed to durable. Since this particular value is about the built environment and places, that's really about materials and buildings themselves. And so we wanted to just be a little more direct on that. So those are the changes to the mission statement and the values. Down under the project evaluation process, I'm going to scroll down here. Changes to the values really sort of necessitate changes to these livability benchmarks. And the benchmarks are really a menu of all the public benefits that we hope to see in our projects. And we don't expect or anticipate that a project will achieve all of these benchmarks. There's 20 of them. But we do like to keep them organized by you can see they're organized by the values here: economic growth, equity and inclusion, neighborhood vibrancy. And the reason for that is, as we're evaluating requests for agency financial participation, we like to see that a project hits all three of the values and isn't, entirely, for example, in the economic opportunity category, but it's really achieving some equity and inclusion and also some neighborhood vibrancy. With regard to the benchmarks, I won't go through them individually, but I will say that we haven't lost anything with the exception of targeted resources. And the reason for that is that the intent behind a benchmark for targeted resources was that we would sort of evaluate a project that was within proximity to another RDA project favorably. And we sort of feel like that the boundaries of a project area are already giving us a geographic focus. And so we don't necessarily need that as a benchmark. And And so that's the only removal. We have added some benchmarks, particularly to reflect the principles of equity and inclusion. And an example there would be right here under ownership. And that's an acknowledgement that home ownership or a business owning their building or their space is an important part of economic opportunity. The wealth building and the that can come from the equity there is a really important part of economic opportunity. So that would be an example of an addition. And we've also done additions with regard to housing and displacement mitigation and affordable housing and missing middle and unique building types. In the benchmarks, we've also just kind of taken some of these and kind of merged them together. An example of that would be previously we had a benchmark for quality materials. We had one for site and urban design, and then we had one for building design and architecture. And what we think we can do is kind of merge those into a single benchmark that we're calling architecture and urban design, whereby we can use the RDA's design review process and create some design guidelines to sort of address quality materials and site and urban design as an example. So those would be some of the changes there to the livability benchmarks. There's much more detail for them in attachment B to your memo, where we actually identify the description and intent for each of them. And for the sake of time, I won't delve into each and every one of those, but you should know that it's there for your reference. And we can talk about any of them that you would like. I will say in closing that in the livability benchmarks, the way we have been using those and the way we would like to further use them more in the future is to start referencing them in our work, whether that's a request for qualifications or a request for proposals where we're redeveloping an agency property. We would like to identify particular benchmarks that are a priority for the redevelopment of that particular property. Or whether we are doing a notice of funding availability, for example, and we would like to identify particular public benefits or livability benchmarks that we would like to achieve through that process. We would like to pull them from this list. And we've done some of that in the past, and we would like to continue doing that in the future and even sort of enhance that sort of referencing back to the guiding framework and the livability benchmarks. So I think that's everything, unless Danny and Tammy, unless you have some comments there, maybe things I've missed.
That was great, Court. The only item I would add is just how these relate to the housing funding priorities that will be adopted on an annual basis. We envision that these livability benchmarks and the framework in general is kind of the guiding policy, umbrella policy for the RDA, and that on an annual basis, you all will adopt a set of housing funding priorities that are more specific or more applicable to community focus areas for that year. So the housing funding priorities that will be adopted on an annual basis will be more specific in nature, but generally be aligned with this overall umbrella policy of these livability benchmarks. So for example, the funding priorities you adopted recently all align with the general intent of these benchmarks.
Right, go ahead. Thank you, Court and Tammy. This is great. And Amy has her hand up. So go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the rework of some of these things to include some of the missions and values that we've been talking about over the last year, like equity and inclusion. I know this is like so ridiculously nitpicky, but that's why you guys love me. So in the mission statement, we say spark economic growth, but if we're changing the livability benchmark to economic opportunity, can we align those things so it says economic opportunity in the mission statement? just so we're consistent. Again, this is my like lawyer brain happening. And then in the mission statement where it says foster authentic and equitable communities, I feel like there is maybe I know what we're getting at there, but it feels like we could say it differently. Or I haven't figured that one out yet, but I might come back to you and be like, can we just change this line a little bit? Because I'm hoping that communities in and of themselves are already equitable, right? Like, I don't know that it, to your point, Court, of saying like the revitalized neighborhoods and how maybe that seemed like that meant that there wasn't already a neighborhood that was vital, right? And that we had to come in and do something about it. That same like authentic and equitable communities line feels similar to me. And I think I know what we're getting at. I know what we want to do there. And again, lawyer brain, nitpicky right now, but just I feel like tweaking that just a little bit, but I haven't figured out what the wording is there, and I don't want to waste our time wordsmithing, but just something to point out there. I really do appreciate the changes. I know, Court, how long you and your team and Tammy and Danny and everyone at RDA have worked on this document for a year and a half or longer, 2 years at this point. But I truly appreciate that it is a sort of living document that we get to come back to it and say, you know, what really are our benchmarks, what really is the mission. And that was the whole point of all of this, is that we had sort of a livable, breathable, living document that kind of helped guide the RDA and more so people who come to the RDA looking for something, right? And I appreciate that as our conversations continue to evolve, you keep this in mind and continue to evolve it as well. So thank you for that. I think it was exactly the intent of what we all were hoping for with this. So truly appreciate it. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Darren?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I agree with Amy. I was that same economic growth versus economic opportunity thing jumped out at me as well. And I wonder if it's not worth trying to just include the 3 values in the mission statement verbatim, like have the words equity and inclusion and neighborhood vibrancy built into that mission statement, just as written, so that there's that clear one-to-one relationship from this step to that step, and then from that step down to the benchmarks. So, but yeah, I also thought that was nitpicky and wasn't going to say it, but I'm glad Amy did because I was thinking it too.
Oh my goodness, we're high maintenance in this, this RDA, but it's a good thing in this case. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question under the livability benchmarks. We've crossed out local business opportunities, supporting locally owned and independent businesses and nonprofits. Seems like most of the other things that we crossed out were duplicative, but that one I'm not seeing elsewhere. Are we dropping our support of locally owned and independent businesses?
No, that's a good question. So, as we thought through about local independent business, small local business, one of the things that we're seeing as a barrier to that in neighborhoods is the affordability component, is the affordability of the commercial space. And so that particular benchmark has been sort of folded into the affordable commercial space as a way to sort of address that need.
Can we then address that with that folding in to emphasize that things need to be affordable so that locally owned and independent businesses can afford them?
Yes, definitely. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. I had two questions, but anybody else? Dan, go ahead.
Just a quick thank you. It's always good to reflect and kind of review, our framework and how we do business, and taking this one along with the housing funding priorities. It's a good review, and it's a good practice for all of us to kind of look back and make sure that we are on the right track, and that we're actually following these frameworks when we do business. So I appreciate that, and I love all the comments from everybody else. So I don't have any other additional comments besides that. Thank you for all the work, Court.
I agree with the vice chair. I think it's great practice that we, it might be a 2-year thing that we review it, but at least we can reflect back. We can see where we've made some, we moved the needle a little bit, or where things change, right? The economy changes. Things happen. We had a pandemic. We had no idea that the opportunity presented itself to extend what we just voted on. So it's nice to keep looking at what we want to do, if we're accomplishing or things have changed, and then we just adapt. So great stuff. I had a question on just a clarification on the people focused. I think it was on the second or third column. I can't remember. What does it exactly mean? People focused opportunity. I can't remember what it said exactly.
Yeah, the phrase "people focused" was a way for us to sort of highlight that the outcomes of the work really are to benefit the quality of life for the people, for the residents and the businesses in Salt Lake City. And so that phrase, or those 2 words, are really meant to sort of just focus that value on who benefits from the work.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I'm not sure if it's very clear, like just by reading it. Like, I'm not sure if maybe it's just me that don't completely comprehend it. Like, or at least I have a different perspective when if I was reading this, people focused to me would be nonprofits that work, with groups of people more directly than what we do. So is that what we're focusing on, or we're focusing on individuals, right? But not necessarily business related. But anyway, if it's clear I don't see anybody else that has that confusion, so it must be clear for everybody else. So that will be fine. And then on the first column, you had one that says opportunities, and that's it. Like, just as the word opportunities. And so what do you mean by that? Or should we add something else to what type of opportunity we're looking at?
Yeah, maybe that was it doesn't look like I'm able to share anymore, but when we were looking at the livability benchmarks and we were looking at the 3 columns, the far left column was economic opportunity. Is that where you were seeing the word economic?
Yeah. It just says opportunity or opportunities.
Yeah. So really the word economic, the opportunity was to replace the word growth. So the category there, the name of the value would be economic opportunity, to tie back to the value up above in the guiding framework. It must have been a formatting issue in what you were looking at.
All right. Okay. All right. Great. Well, thanks for the clarification. I don't have any other questions. I think we all said what we need to say. Yeah, go ahead,
Chair,
Tammy.
just to make it clear, the plan is to incorporate your feedback and bring it back at a future meeting in the form of a policy resolution that you can consider and potentially adopt at that time.
Okay. All right. So if there's any other feedback, what you're saying, Tammy, is send them your way before, soon, so that they can incorporate it, and then we can vote on this.
Yes, thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We are moving on to item number 4, which is also informational, and it's about the draft sustainable development policy. At the table, we have Allison Rowland, Council Office Policy Analyst, Ashley Ogden, RDA Project Manager, and Karen Linsley, RDA Project Manager. Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a correction. I believe it's going to be Lauren Parisi who's at the table rather than Ashley Ogden. I'm not sure how that happened, but just so no one's surprised. I'm not going to really give an introduction to this document or to this briefing. I just wanted to mention that I was able to come up with some policy questions. I sent them to all of you very late at about 11:25 this morning. And on that email, you can see both the 3 questions that the RDA staff came up with in terms of policy questions, and then a number of other questions that council staff came up with. Obviously, that's just for your use if it's useful, and if not, well, that's okay too. So I will turn it over to RDA staff.
Great, thank you, Allison. And we did get that email. We're hoping that in our presentation, some of those questions might be answered. And for those that don't get answered today, we will come back to you and have an opportunity, hopefully, to answer them in the future. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide, we could get started. We wanted to start by giving some context for the creation of the RDA Sustainable Development Policy. The 2020 census showed that Utah's population grew by 18.5% over the past 10 years, faster than any other state in the country, and over 2 times faster than the national average. And we know that population growth brings economic opportunities, but the growth also brings new demand for housing, new commercial and industrial buildings, and that those have consequences for air quality, public health, and climate change. So using a grant from UCARE, the RDA worked with Utah Clean Energy and Salt Lake City Sustainability Department to look at available technologies, review case studies from existing buildings, and develop a policy that will help us use the RDA's incentives to move Salt Lake City toward more efficient, emission-free buildings, and ultimately a more sustainable future. I wanted to mention that representatives from Utah Clean Energy and Sustainability are both here today to answer any questions you might have after the presentation. And that's Kevin Emerson and Peter Nelson that we heard from earlier in the meeting. Next slide, please. So while Utah's making progress on our air quality, we still have challenges. The latest State of the Air report from 2020 that the American Lung Association publishes gave Salt Lake County a failing grade for both ozone days and 24-hour particle pollution. So one way to tackle this issue is to reduce direct emissions that come from our buildings. Next slide. The Utah Division of Air Quality estimates that by 2024, area sources, and this is the category that includes homes and buildings, will become the single largest source of emissions. In this graphic, we can see that emissions from transportation are becoming a smaller percentage of total emissions as newer vehicles burn fuel more efficiently. Electric vehicles make up a greater share of the cars that are on the road, and transit use is going up. So improving the energy efficiency of our buildings and moving away from on-site combustion in our new and existing buildings will reduce area source emissions and make long-term progress on our local air quality. Next slide. We believe this policy will support what is a growing market for emission-free and all-electric buildings. A recent report by GreenBiz on the state of green business highlighted that there are signals nationally that point to the next generation of buildings becoming all-electric. The 3 major indicators are shown on the slide, and they are the falling cost of renewables, the growing market of electric appliances, and concerns about natural gas combustion. Next slide. So Salt Lake City is working to grow in a smart, sustainable manner, and we recognize that buildings in our city directly impact our ability to meet our community's climate and air quality goals. With buildings constructed to last 30 to 50 years, our decisions about how we build today will determine our emissions for decades to come. And next slide. We wanted to put this into the context of other sustainability efforts in the city. Salt Lake City's Climate Positive 2040 plan, which was published in 2016, calls for 100% net renewable energy for the community's electricity supply by 2030. And that is to help us meet a goal of an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. And Salt Lake City isn't alone in this effort. We're one of 23 communities in Utah that have set 100% net renewable energy goals for their communities by 2030. And that program is being developed by the Utah 100 Communities program. So the RDA's policy is intended to really maximize the positive impacts of what will be a future clean energy grid by facilitating the development of buildings that are fully powered by electricity. And Lauren will talk now about the specifics of the RDA's Sustainable Development Policy.
Thank you, Kara. So yeah, under these overarching citywide goals, the RDA's more specific target that comes from the direction of Mayor Mendenhall is to be emission-free by 2023. And so what we really mean by this is we hope to support only projects without on-site emissions by the year 2023 or all electric buildings, as Kara has been describing. So additionally, we'd like Salt Lake City to become even more of a leader in sustainability and have models of different building types and sustainable development projects, whether it be mixed use, commercial, or missing middle housing projects that others can look to across Utah and even across the US as these models of sustainable building projects. Next slide. So the purpose of the RDA's proposed sustainable development policy is to accomplish these goals and to promote a built environment that incorporates sustainable building technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve local air quality, preserve natural resources, and enhance our community's resiliency. Next slide. So before I jump into the components of the policy, I did want to establish our benchmark or the current sustainable incentive that we have in place now, just as a reminder, is that projects can receive a 0.5% interest rate reduction if they achieve a sustainable certification or meet the standards of a sustainable certification. And so this policy really goes above and beyond that, of course, and kind of requires sustainable building measures in almost all RDA projects. So I did want to kind of mention that. And so looking at our proposed policy, it's really broken down into two components. And those are our threshold requirements. And then secondly, our RDA program specific requirements. So to start with the first threshold requirement, this will apply to all new construction projects, no matter the amount of funding, and also projects that receive over $400,000 in RDA funding. So this could be commercial renovation projects, housing rehab projects that aren't new construction but receive over this dollar amount. And so the requirement here is that projects will have to earn a design to earn Energy Star score of 90 or above, or an equivalent energy use intensity score, or value rather. And this threshold really aims to encourage the use of more efficient systems for things like heating, cooling, lighting, appliances, insulation, and more. Energy Star is a well-known industry metric that was created by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy, and applicants can utilize the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool that's online and it's free to calculate this design to earn Energy Star score. And for reference, a building with an Energy Star score of 75 and above indicates that it performs in the top 25% of similar building types nationwide. So here, we're really looking to encourage buildings that perform in the top 10% with a score of 90 or higher. And so the second part of this threshold is to ensure that buildings are actually achieving that score. Oh, sorry, if you could go back to the other slide. But I can explain, we're also going to require that projects participate in the city's or our sustainability department's Elevate Buildings program. And this is an energy benchmarking program that requires property managers to submit energy use data to the city on an annual basis. And this way we'll be able to review whether or not buildings are meeting their projected Energy Star score. And now you can flip to the next slide. Thank you. So the second part of the threshold requirement will again apply to all new construction projects and also projects that receive over $900,000 in RDA funding. And these buildings must be designed to operate without any on-site fossil fuel combustion or natural gas used for things like heating and cooking. And the intent of this requirement and building electrification more generally is that buildings will be set up to operate carbon-free once the electric grid is sourced by all renewable energy. So that's the second part of that threshold. Okay, so now next slide, please. So moving on to the RDA program requirements, and this will be in addition to achieving those threshold requirements. Certain RDA programs will either require or further incentivize what we're calling off-site and on-site net zero standards. So to start, the off-site net zero standard requires that projects essentially pay for a renewable energy utility tariff to source their energy needs from renewable resources. And this is sometimes referred to as a green tariff. But right now in Utah, there are 2 existing programs that a project could participate in to meet this standard, including Rocky Mountain Power's Blue Sky program and Rocky Mountain Subscriber Solar program. And the Utah 100 Communities program that Kara touched on is currently in the works to establish more renewable energy sources that consumers can potentially utilize to meet this standard in the future. Additionally, with this offsite net zero requirement, and of course it's to promote net zero buildings, and so projects must either meet the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code Zero Energy Appendix standards or receive a net zero certification, such as Passive House, Enterprise Green Communities, International Living Future Institute, or LEED Zero. Okay, and next slide, please. And then the second level of the RDA program requirements is the on-site net zero. And this is the highest requirement in our policy, and it requires that buildings source their energy needs with on-site renewable energy by either supplying at least 50% of the project's total estimated annual electricity consumption with on-site renewables, or utilizing at least 50% of the project's available roof space for on-site renewable generation. So really looking at solar and utilizing half of the roof's area for solar. And any electricity that can't be sourced with on-site renewables for various reasons can be, someone could utilize the off-site for whatever can't be sourced by on-site, if that makes sense. And again here, projects will be required to meet the IECC Zero Energy Appendix or obtain a third-party certification. Next slide, please. So again, these off-site and on-site net zero requirements will apply to the RDA programs as listed on the table here. So for example, for the tax increment reimbursement program, someone receiving over $500,000, that if they're receiving a TIRA, they would be required to meet the highest standard or the on-site net zero building status, as we feel that this is the highest incentive that the RDA could offer a project. And we did set it at 500,000 because we could potentially provide micro TIF or smaller amounts of TIF in the future with future programs that we've thought about before. But typically, tax increment reimbursements are over 500,000. So most of those projects would have to meet that on-site standard. For land dispositions, we would require the off-site and highly encourage or rank projects higher that utilize on-site renewables. And then for the RDA loan program, it's not a requirement, but we would give you a 1% interest rate reduction for off-site net zero and a 2% interest rate reduction on your loan for on-site net zero. And we wanted to make these a little bit bigger or larger incentives than the 0.5% interest rate reduction to really encourage projects to utilize this. Yeah, so moving on to the next slide, please. So we did want to mention that we held 3 roundtable discussions back in May, and in attendance were local developers, architects, and affordable housing professionals. And they really gave us a lot of great feedback, some of which I've included on this slide. But just to highlight a few of the changes we made based on their feedback was we removed the renewable energy utility tariff as a threshold requirement and instead made it one of these higher requirements, the off-site net zero requirement. We increased the design to earn Energy Star score from 80 to 90, and that really was from feedback that 80 wasn't high enough, and especially for buildings or projects that are receiving financial incentives. We also, as a way to ensure that these buildings are meeting the design to earn Energy Star score, we are requiring that, again, they'll participate in this, our sustainability department's established Elevate Buildings program, and that's something that we didn't originally have, but we're glad we've come up with a way to kind of track that. And then finally, we received a lot of feedback that it would be really helpful to provide trainings in the future to go over this policy with local developers and people that will be utilizing it once or if it's approved. Next slide, please. So to end the presentation, we just wanted to go over a few examples of sustainable building projects, many of which might even meet this new policy. So the first you might be familiar with is Diamond Rail, which did receive some RDA funding. It's an all-electric project, and they have 80 units. Some I believe are affordable. And the interesting thing about this project is the developer had 2 plan sets, one with traditional energy systems and one that was all electric. And they actually had a cost savings of 1.1% utilizing the all electric building plan. So that's something that's interesting. And I think that we found in our research, you know, there's not always the cost savings. Electric isn't always cheaper, but sometimes it is. It can vary project to project, but it's definitely not always more expensive. So we wanted to highlight that here. Next slide. So the next is an existing condo building, the Stansberry Condos. And this was an all-electric multifamily retrofit with 75 units. And so they had a savings of about $35,000 in annual energy costs. So that has a project payback period of about 9 years, including that cash rebate from Rocky Mountain Power. So we just wanted to highlight that this can be applied to rehabs as well as new construction. Next slide, please. And finally, here was another kind of mid-rise apartment building with 48 units in Tooele. And again, here they had a project savings of about $30,000 in annual energy costs. And looking at the project cost of about $230,000 to install these high efficiency heat pumps and things of that nature. They had a payback period of about 5 years, again, utilizing utility incentives. And so that's another thing to look at is these projects, when they install energy efficient systems, they can get these utility incentives to factor into their overall project costs and operating costs, which is, we feel, a great benefit. And I think that wraps up our presentation. And I know we went through a lot of information, but please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Lauren and Kara. Board members, do you have questions, comments? Welcome, Chris Wharton. I see Amy. Amy's hand is up. Welcome, Mayor, as well. I just see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, can I just say that I love you guys. I love the RDA team and staff. You guys are amazing. And when there is even, and I've said this in the past, but when there's even an inkling of an idea in someone's head, you take it and run with it and create something fabulous. And I am just thrilled at this. And I just I love you. I just want that out there. I do want to say that as we look at it's on what I'm looking at is the slide that is the RDA program sustainability measures and sort of the like incentives that we'd be giving based on what RDA program it is. And I'm just wondering, how do we move from an incentive to more of a mandate? And is that something that we want to do, which I kind of think it is? Are we like easing people into this? And then we get to say, oh, P.S. by the way, now, 3 years later, 4 years later, this is like, you have to have this in order to participate in one of our RDA programs. Because I appreciate the incentives. I just, if we have these big lofty goals, which I love, and we need to go bold and be the leaders in this. And I appreciate Mayor Mendenhall for kind of taking some of that stance. How do we move from just incentive based to more mandate based? And do we want to?
I can try to respond to that. And so the threshold requirements, which again is meeting that Energy Star target and then going all electric, those are mandates for all new construction projects and projects that receive over 400,000. And the amount there, or that dollar amount threshold, was because we thought maybe adaptive reuse type projects might not be able to hit that. Although I think as we go along and roll this out, we'll try to look at that and see if maybe they could, and that should be a mandate for them as well. But anyhow, so those first thresholds are mandates. And then the program specifics requirements, we realize that some of our incentives are larger, and so they should go above and beyond the threshold requirements. and we're going to mandate, like for the TIRA or a tax increment reimbursement, that they have on-site renewables. And then for the land dispositions or RFPs, we're going to mandate that they at least have the off-site net zero, and we would rank them higher with on-site. The incentive here, or the one that's really still an incentive, are those interest rate reductions. But they still, any new construction would still have to meet the thresholds, and we would hope that by increasing the percentage of a reduction, projects would choose to utilize those tools.
So it's, and I am looking more at the RDA loan programs with the incentive of the reduction, the interest rate reduction. So it's more of like a bonus. Like you have to meet this, and if you go above and beyond, you kind of get a bonus out of it.
Yes, you have to meet those thresholds, and if you get a larger incentive from the RDA, then you have to do more. And the interest rate reduction is kind of a bonus.
Sure, I really do appreciate it. Like I said, you literally, from our presentation, the last presentation that Court gave to this presentation, it's really, you take an inkling of something that one of us is thinking and run with it and create something fabulous. And I really appreciate this. So thank you.
Great stuff. Go ahead, Chris.
On the land disposition and on the loan program, why are you advising that we just make those like strong recommendations instead of requiring either on-site or off-site net zero?
I would say because I think there is cost associated with the on-site and off-site. And so when we're giving a larger incentives, I think definitely these projects can bear that cost. But if it's a loan, we weren't sure if they would want to bear that cost. And I think we found there's kind of a balance we need to achieve in terms of not pushing too hard to detract people from utilizing our incentives. You know, we still want to fund affordable housing, and there's still, you know, all these initiatives that the city has. And so there was kind of we wanted to strike a balance between integrating sustainable development and still having people utilize our tools instead of turning to other funding sources.
Okay, I think that makes sense. My follow-up question is, and then in the areas where we're just highly encouraging net zero, what are the other sustainability requirements or other sustainability things that we're requiring on those?
So we're pretty much always going to require, with all new construction and projects that receive over 400,000, you'll have to achieve a design to earn Energy Star score of 90. So that really looks at the energy efficiency of a building. They'll have to participate in the Elevate Buildings program, which is the sustainability's benchmarking program, energy benchmarking program. And finally, they'll have to be all electric. And then the on-site and off-site net zero are the above and beyond that, depending on the program.
Okay, so sorry, then I have another follow-up question. Why are we setting the line at 400,000? Like, shouldn't it be, you know, for basically any project that we're funding?
So yeah, and I think when we looked at other cities' sustainable development policies, they typically had some sort of threshold, and it did really range. For example, I know Portland, I believe, set Prosper Portland's, which is similar to the RDA, they set a threshold at 200,000, but it's not going net zero. The incentives are a little different. The city of Chicago sets it at 1 million that you'll have to implement sustainable development. And so I think we kind of talked about this a lot and landed on 400,000 because maybe there are these smaller projects that need maybe some emergency type commercial funding, and they aren't able to integrate these sustainable design tactics last minute. So that's kind of why we landed on that number.
Okay. I might be in favor of lowering that number.
Madam Chair.
Chris, yes, 1 second, Darren. So Chris, would you like to maybe send some feedback to staff about that and see if...
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it so low that we're we know we're going to lose opportunities and projects, but I don't really want to go with 400,000 just because it's in the middle. Like, I want us to be a little bit more aggressive and make it so that it's, you know, so it made sense to me, the first answer to the question that I asked of saying, you know, why don't we require on or offsite net zero? And the answer was that it gets to a point where like the return on investment, you know, they're not going to actually be gaining. It doesn't benefit them to participate in the program because the cost it's going to be cost prohibitive. So I don't want to do that, but I want to be just like on the in the black on that line, so that we're pushing forward, but we're not making it prohibitive. So
yeah,
I would
we can definitely look into fine tuning that number and providing more support as to or lowering it as we kind of research that specific number some more.
Okay, thanks.
I appreciate that too. Thanks, Lauren. Darren, you had your hand up. You're unmuted.
Thanks. I'm confused about that thing Chris was just talking about. The threshold requirements, am I understanding this correctly, that any new construction project that even gets $1 of funding must meet those, and adaptive reuse projects that receive over 400 or 900,000 in funding will have to meet that A and or B threshold? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. And kind of the thought process behind that is new construction projects should be able to implement this from the get-go. It may be more difficult for rehabs. So if they're not receiving as large of an incentive, they might be exempt. But again, we could look at that.
So no, I think that's smart. I think it's good to do that. I just want to make sure that that's clear that any new construction project, there is no dollar amount. It's only the dollar amount only applies to adaptive reuse projects. So I don't know if that changes Chris's concern or not, but I do also want to ask a question. So what if it's a new construction project that has a lot of things that we value in the project, and it comes to us for emergency gap financing after all the plans are kind of baked and set? Do we just say no? And is that a decision we want to take, or is there a carve out for that emergency gap financing where we're maybe only 10% of the financing staff or whatever the case may be, and we really do like the project for all the reasons except for the sustainability ones? Do we have an exception for that? And I'm not saying that we should, but I mean, is that anticipated? And if so, I guess it's a policy question for the board.
I think that's a really good question, just FYI.
And I was just popping on to say that the board has frequently received requests and sometimes initiated requests to waive policies in certain circumstances, and the board retains that ability to waive a policy, or I don't know if the technical term is waive or exemption. I don't know, that would probably be an attorney question, but the board does have that ability. it probably makes it more rare if you don't build it into the policy itself. And so maybe that's a consideration as you go forward of, do you want to make it more or less rare for those occasions to occur? Do you want to make it easier or harder for those requests to be made?
But right now it's not in there at all.
So it actually is in there. We built an exception in there for those reasons exactly. There may be other community benefits that outweigh, I suppose, these sustainability requirements. And so we did definitely think of that. And we, number 5, the very last part of the policy has some language that the RDA board can approve an exception to this policy. And it's written kind of generally. And we thought about listing specific reasons for exceptions. For example, if a site is too small and doesn't have enough space to accommodate on-site or something of that nature. But for now, it's just kind of this general exception, and staff would analyze it and bring it to you on a case-by-case basis.
Does that satisfy your question, Darren? Like, or do we need to be any?
Yeah, I think so. And again, I mean, I wouldn't be entirely opposed to just being really strict on this because, I mean, it's our environment and it's the air quality. And those are things that if a building goes in that contributes to poor air quality, that's there for 30 years or 50 years or longer. So I'm not entirely opposed to being really strict. Now, I just want to be clear about if that carve out exists. And so I would be okay with that in terms of we approve it on a case-by-case basis. I do have one more question, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead, and a couple more minutes. Your last, yeah, this will be the last question.
Maybe it's more of a comment, but on the loan programs where we are giving a 1 or 2% interest rate reduction, I've never been a fan of those policies where it's like this is the percentage of interest rate we reduce for doing this thing, because this thing may cost X amount of dollars for the developer, or it may be X amount of benefit to the city. But the interest rate reduction is a totally variable benefit to the developer because it depends on how big that loan is. So if it's a very small loan, a 2% reduction is not really that beneficial, and they may not do that thing we're trying to get them to do. Whereas if it's a very large loan, then maybe we're giving away too much of a tax or an interest rate reduction for something that's relatively small. So I've always felt like interest rate reductions, just like a blanket percentage reduction, is not right sized necessarily to the incentive we're trying to the activity that we're trying to incentivize. So and I know that goes through like all of our policies, and that's not just in this one, but I would be interested in a little bit of analysis as to, is that really the right amount of percentage reduction, or do we need to say a reduction worth this value or something like that? Because it seems like that is either a super good incentive or a really bad incentive, and it just depends on how big that loan is, as long as I'm understanding the financing correct.
I like that too, so it will be nice to see something. Go ahead, Dan. And I did say that Darren was the last
Yeah.
question.
So
but
I'm not going to ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they can ask. I'll get a follow-up later on, just in writing about if they don't achieve their sustainability goals, but they got a loan. You said the 24 to 30 months. You don't have to answer it now, but if you could get us an answer on that and the penalties for that, and maybe also dive into the reasons why they missed that mark when they did their design, because they should have been able to hit it in the design. So if they miss it that much and they have to have 24 months, that means somewhere we failed in the approval process of their design or their building permit, or they were just really, well, I won't say any more than that. Just if we get an answer on that part, because I'm concerned about that. And then just another, maybe a question on covered parking lots, incentives to do covered parking lots, because they don't have a good return on investment, but they have a great use of flat space area there. So maybe an answer on covered parking lots, incentives to develop those. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren, Kara, and Allison. This is great. We're super excited, obviously. As you can see, you can tell probably. We are moving on. And I want to double check with Ben Lutke that number 5, we already passed it earlier. We're not talking about this again, correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 6. And this is report and announcements from the executive director. Is there anything? No? Okay, I see the director nodding head. So we're moving to item number 7, report and announcements from RDA staff.
That is me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few quick updates, won't take much time. Just wanted to inform the board that the adaptive reuse commercial development loan to the West End project in the 9-line project area has received its certificate of occupancy. So they are scheduling a ribbon cutting celebration probably in late fall or early winter as they get their tenants moved in, and we will let the board know about that. We are currently still in the process. Our notice of funding availability is still ongoing for the Housing Development Loan Program. Staff held a information seminar for attendees to walk through the guidelines and application. That is also posted on the website for anyone to watch, and that runs through the end of October before those applications are due. And then just a few comments on the Gallivan Center. They had an extremely busy September with 25 events over 30 days, including the last of the Twilight concert series. They are currently working to get the ice rink up and going, as well as the lights for the holiday decorations. And they recently passed a milestone with the Excellence in the Community concert series, surpassing over 12 million views of that concert series. So that is something that's pretty impressive, as that has grown beyond just the physical nature of the Gallivan Center and out into online viewing. And then finally, a bit of sad news. If you are familiar with any of the Gallivan staff, hopefully you know Bart Walker. He is retiring from the Gallivan Center after 20 years of being the rental, I know, after 20 years of being the rental supervisor for the plaza, as well as the manager for the ice rink. I certainly hope he is doing something more exciting right now than listening to our meeting right now. But I wanted to make sure that we commemorated him and gave him a lot of appreciation for his support and time with the city, and specifically with managing those aspects of the Gallivan Center and seeing its success over the last 20 plus years. So congrats, Bart. I hope you have some other forum for telling your horrible dad jokes and find someone who can laugh at those. But you know, Bart, you know what I'm talking about. So
It's at poker.
I'm drawing out, Madam Chair, unless there are any questions for us.
He tells all of his bad jokes at poker.
So find a day to play with him, so to enjoy that. But no, seriously, I mean, this is impressive, and obviously without him, we wouldn't be able to, to succeed, right, with the amount of events and all the logistics that goes behind it. So thank you so much for the service. It'll be hard to find, right, somebody else to replace that position, and to do it with such efficiency, especially throughout the pandemic, throughout, all the things that we had to deal with. So enjoy your retirement. That's exciting. Thank you so much. I have a question about the West End. I would love to get an invite to the grand opening to go see it, first of all. But the second question is, do they still have some spots open, like not leased, to see if there's any interest from local businesses to move in there?
I will check on that, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that they did have some tenants they were talking to. Last update I got, I don't know if those had progressed beyond just letters of intent. So we can get that information and circle back to you directly on who those are and what we can share at this point.
Perfect. And so for the board, one of the ideas for that project was to see if we could implement or help some of the businesses that exist in the area. Maybe they already exist, or their neighbors that would like to open a small business where we can keep them in the neighborhood instead of displacing them. At least one or two spots to be separated for that purpose as we look at gentrification strategies in the neighborhood. We obviously focus a lot on housing, but I thought commercial anti-gentrification is also a way that the RDA can help the situation. So I think we talked about this before. I just wanted to remind everybody about that project right there. We're moving on to, thank you, Danny. We're moving on to, we've done already, why do we have hold on, am I looking at this one? Yeah, I'm looking at this one. We're moving on to item number D, which is written briefings, and we don't have any. We don't have a consent agenda to approve. I don't believe we have a tentative closed session. And so, correct, Jen? Okay,
no closed
now for the RDA, great. And so I think we are adjourned then.
That's right. And I just wanted to make a note for the council that in order to convene in our council closed session, which will be at the beginning of council meeting, we need the council to convene in the public council WebEx and then go to the council closed session WebEx. So sorry for the link jumping, but that's where we are.
Also, can we, Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, go ahead.
Let's take just a 5-minute break, 6 minutes if I look at my clock right now, and convene at 3:35 in the work session, and then we'll switch to the closed session, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And text me if you have trouble finding those links. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. See you later.